everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Showcase series brought to you by Parkway Media Partners and Patranya Media LLC. I'm your host, Patranya Bhoolsuwan, and I'm in the studio with some very special guests today. We have a local author who just came out with a new book, this one right here, 92 Hours. His name is Rich Schiesser, and we have Frances Young, who's a clinical therapist here in town, who's read the book, and she has some very great perspective when it comes to what's happening inside this book. So, Rich, I'm actually going to return this book to you so you can tell us more about it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yes.
And congratulations on your brand new book.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us here today. I think in many ways it's so appropriate because one of the themes of my book is about mental health, and particularly teenage mental health, and this being June, the month that...
Men's Mental Health Awareness Month,
It kind of ties in. But I wrote the book for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to tell Ben's story. My son Ben was a very unique individual. He started out as a typical young boy, but by the time he got to junior high school, he was fast becoming an overachiever. He was excelling in academics and athletics. He was voted class president in the 8th grade, and he was winning awards for science fairs and public speaking. And it continued on in high school. His freshman and sophomore year in high school, he was the captain and quarterback of his football team. He was elected class president, homecoming prince. But then in his junior year, things changed for him. And he was diagnosed with mild bipolar disorder. But I think something else happened that may be very common within a lot of teenagers, particularly those that start out as maybe ahead of the others.
Right.
Their peers catch up to him. You know, he was physically and mentally ahead of his class, 8th and 9th grade, but by the 10th grade, others were catching up to him and maybe passing him by a little bit. And that can be tough for a teenager. And coupled with the bipolar, he struggled with it. So we kept a close eye on him, and we got him into some counseling and other treatment, and he seemed to be doing fine. And then he made a move up to Montana. He had been living in Southern California, and for a variety of reasons, it worked out well that he moved to Montana. But things just went bad for him in the fall. This was about 20 years ago.
And this was what the book was obviously based on, talking about your son, Ben.
Yes.
And what he went through and what the family went through.
Yes.
And, you know, and for people who haven't read the book and wanted to get a copy of the book to read it, obviously, you know, you're telling us the story leading up to his untimely death, obviously, right? We're going to talk about that. But, I mean, you were mentioning mental health, a big part of his story.
Yes.
But you wrote this to share that part of the story, but also ways that other families can take away, even if they didn't go through exactly what you and Ben went through.
Yes, exactly. I took a while to digest all that.
This was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago.
This was over 20 years ago. Actually, a month before that, Ben was on like fall break, and I invited him down to spend several days with me in Southern California. He was living with his mother in Montana,
right?
And he jumped at the chance, and we had a great 4 days. We did all the things we used to do, and went to the beaches we used to go to, and drove up the coast. And the highlight of that trip was on the last day. We did a charity ride, and it was a charity motorcycle ride, and we ended up at the ABC television studios, and we were just having a great time. And then I took him back to the airport that Sunday afternoon, and I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last time I would ever see him alive. And he went back, and about a month later, the day before Thanksgiving, he just had just a horrific day, as probably many teenagers may have, where everything seemed to go wrong. And we think in our heart of hearts that he did not intend the result that happened, but I think he was in such emotional pain at the time that he just wanted the pain to momentarily stop. And he made some decisions that unfortunately resulted in ending his life.
So leading up to that, and then after the fact, and you go into that a little bit. We want to make sure people get a chance to read it and get that story. And among the people who've read it, Frances Young, who've never met you until we got you guys kind of together to learn more about what your book was about and to get her perspective. Because part of the reasons that you wanted to get this book out there is to get people to get help if they go through a situation. So tell me about your reaction, Frances, when you first saw this book and you got to read it quite quickly. You went through the book, right?
I did. It's a great read. It's very emotion invoking. I think Rich hit a lot of things very early and pretty much ahead of the times, right? Addressing mental health in his own child, which is so taboo up to this day.
Right.
Even when he had discussed just, counseling services, with the mother, of Ben, and being able to kind of have that difference in opinion and being honestly more open from what the readings have talked about, and then just sharing something so difficult, but then also being able to talk about how to prevent things like this from happening, and just being able to break that stigma, because a lot of people don't want to say something's quote wrong with their child, but it's more like seeing their need for help and being able to address it besides making it like a parenting failure. And I think he addressed that so well and so vulnerably in the book.
And, as a clinical therapist, how important is it for maybe other families, even other parents who are going through really tough times, especially when it comes to their kids' mental health, to be able to see a story and kind of see that other families are going through a similar situation?
I think it makes them understand more. I think, I see families and parents and, as a clinician, and there's so much internalized blame with this is happening because of me. I did this. And it's really not the case a lot of times. And you read mental health flyers and things like that. They're there to be helpful, and it says look for these signs, but we really can't pigeonhole that into these 3 signs or it,
right?
Because they can miss what's presenting. As Rich described his son, all these great accolades, and then something took a turn,
right?
And that ties into a bigger discussion about just, especially adolescent age, just the way they think very black and white. If I'm not perfect, I'm awful. And there's never that in between until they're taught that.
Right.
And just even coping skills. And that starts at home, but sometimes there's that barrier where then, clinical help can help mend that.
Yeah, and we'll come back to more resources that are available and the fact that you're working with families right now doing just that. But, people are looking to this book and maybe looking to kind of learn more about your story. Maybe, what is something that you really want people to take away? Obviously, this was your personal story, but what are you kind of the core of what you want other families to take away from this?
Well, I think one of the things is that, particularly with adolescents and teenagers, to stay active in their lives.
Despite all the distractions that they have now compared to 20 years ago,
right?
It's so much harder in some ways.
Exactly, and I talk about that a little bit with social media and know what they're doing, but teenagers aren't always forthcoming with particularly their parents. If they're feeling down or depressed, that depression is often easy to hide and difficult to detect. So I advise parents to, not only know who your child is and what they're about, their interests, know who their friends are, and know the parents of their friends. Because even if their friends aren't opening up to you, maybe their parents will, and find out. And when I wrote the book, initially, I wanted to share Ben's story. I wanted to help other teens. I wanted to help other parents. But it was a process. It was a journey of my own because, my background was more in the technical writing, and I am so glad my editor did not publish the first draft because it was not as readable as it is now. And they basically said, just put your heart on the pages.
But that's what
Tell
people
us what
remember.
you're
You said
feeling.
that was, what caught you was the emotion that he conveyed through the pages.
Very relatable, very personal. It's not
Yeah.
it's not a dry read. The second you open the page, I mean, you're really into the story of him and his son.
Well, and as an author, you never really know how are you connecting with the reader or not. But I did have a confirmation of that just a few weeks ago. There was a well-known entertainer here in Las Vegas who read my book, and he came up to me and he sat down, and he's a songwriter himself. He writes lyrics, and he said, Rich, there was a line in your book that just got to me. And I go, what was it? And it was right before my son passed. And I'm going to get teary-eyed talking about it. But I looked at my son and I said, what is it you needed that you didn't have? And what was it you had that you didn't need? And this entertainer, I mean, he was tearing up, which was making me tear up. And he said, Rich, those lines are so powerful, because he had 2 teenage sons himself. And he said he went right home and just hugged them and said, is there anything you need that you're not getting? And so one of my messages would be, try to be as brutally honest with your children and your adolescents. Find out what's really going on inside them. So that was very rewarding to me. So there was one other thing that was just kind of you always wonder what it might have been. In researching the book, I wanted to find out what my son's last day was about. What were all the factors that went in? And it turned out a couple weeks before, the city of Butte, the school district, had been having a problem with teenage suicide. They were concerned. So, and this started 4 or 5 years prior. So they started a program in their high school for all the juniors and seniors in the fall. There was like a 1-hour seminar for everyone, and it was put on by social workers and therapists and others. And there were 2 parts to it. One of it talked about, the emotional challenges and how ending your life is not the answer. But the other part is they brought in a funeral director and talked about the embalming process and what happens when a person passes away, and all of the the physical things that go on in the body. And it was pretty grueling. And since they started that program, they had never had a single teenage suicide.
So, Francis,
but let me finish one thing. On the year that Ben died, they held that seminar. They kept the roster. Ben was the only person who did not attend. He was out ill that day.
Oh, wow.
So you always wonder what might have happened.
I mean, what was your reaction hearing that? What do you think was, something like, if that were the case, I mean, do you think just thinking about mortality and seeing that kind of in their face has an impact? Or does it work differently for everyone?
I would say both. I mean, there are interventions that are in place in high schools that have, I don't want to say fear-based tactic, but like a reality-based tactic that's not the norm, which would be like the fatal piece and people from the morgue coming. And we even have accident scenes where we have paid actors that will be the, quote, dead body in those scenes. And it does incite that concern, like the permanency of it. That's been effective. I think Rich has something so powerful about just asking, what do your children need? But to even further that is to say, like, to normalize yourself. I've seen countless adolescents in the last 8 years, and I would say about 90% of them will always say, like, they feel like they can't relate to their parent, or their parent can't relate to them. And just humanizing ourselves. Some of them haven't even seen their parents cry, haven't seen what they've gone through. And I think we want to be strong for our children, but we don't know that we have to normalize these emotions so that when they experience them, that they can share that with us because we've experienced it too. And so it's a lot of it is starting it at home. but sometimes you just can't see it. You're in your own stuff, and as parents, we have our own stressors, and we don't want to see what may be painful, and so that's when you would again get that outside help. But I think what he's saying, it makes a lot of sense.
And, I wanted to come back. We only have a few minutes left, but I want Rich to kind of talk about what, people probably want to hear more, and you have a lot more to tell them and share them through the book as well. So hopefully you'll have some events coming up soon for them to do that. But also, Francis, if people want to reach out to you and just wanted to find help in this community, I mean, and we hear so much about not having enough resources, especially when it comes to mental health. What's your advice for families, and what's the first step they should go to find the kind of help that they need?
I'm always a good resource. I'm happy to navigate that. I can know the overwhelm as a clinician and as a parent of what that could look like, so I can always be somebody that can help navigate that when it comes to location in the Valley, because we are at a high amount of therapists that are wanting to help and treat specific populations, especially adolescents. I see children, adolescents. I see men individually, women, families. I would say start with, do I have insurance? I mean, accessibility is a barrier when it comes to therapy. Accessibility is huge. Insurance, do they take your insurance? If not, sliding scale. Location, do you want to drive an hour in 5 o'clock traffic after work to go to therapy? So many of these things can be barriers. So location.
But you can be a good resource in helping them navigate that. And cost aside, obviously accessibility, but it doesn't cost anything, obviously, to start a conversation. And that's kind of what we're doing today, right? Letting people know that there are resources out there, and there are stories out there that people can relate to, right? And 92 Hours is definitely one place that they can go to. And so, Rich, what do you have coming up that people can maybe look? Is there where they can find more information about the book?
Well, I have a website specifically for the book called 92hours.com, and it details all of the upcoming. I have a few more podcasts coming up in future months, and there's going to be more book signings here in the Las Vegas area. And it looks like we're having a statewide book signing in the fall up in the state of Montana. We'll probably be doing one in Arizona and California.
That's great.
But my website will have all the details in it.
That's great. Where can we find your information, Francis?
You can find me at francis@maternalmindscounseling.com. You can send me a quick email, and I'm able to help navigate you, if not give you some
We'll
services
put a link
myself.
for both of you guys in our YouTube channel as well. But thank you so much, and congratulations. Any final words you want to say, Rich?
No, just I wish everyone well who reads the book and takes it to heart, and I hope that it helps people with the challenges they have.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And, Ben's story lives on, obviously, with this book. And hopefully he can be a great help to many people and many families out there as well. So thank you so much, Rich, for coming on the show. And Francis, to you as well. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching to this episode of Entrepreneur Showcase Series. And we'll see you again next time.